Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker. The November general election landscape is now becoming clear after a series of high-profile and competitive primaries this summer. Most of the key general election matchups are now set as Democrats aim to take back control of both chambers of Congress from Republicans. And after some bruising primary fights, the candidates in these key races are a mix of progressives and moderates, newcomers and establishment figures, but they're all pivoting their general election message towards unity.
I appreciate that you made your voice heard, but I also want you to know this, that I will work my tail off to earn your votes.
There is so much more that unites us than divides us. And so to all of our supporters here tonight, watching on TV, tomorrow we begin to mend fences.
This movement is not from the left. It is not from the right. It's from the bottom. And we are rising.
Whether you are a Republican, an independent, or a Democrat, there is room here for you in our campaign.
On the Senate front, we saw two big progressive victories in the Midwest, where Abdul Al-Sayed will take on former Congressman Mike Rogers in Michigan, and Minnesota Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan will face former NFL sideline reporter Michelle Tafoya in November. We'll speak with the Lieutenant Governor in just a moment. The Maine Senate race will also feature a progressive, with former State Senator Troy Jackson going up against Senator Susan Collins after Graham Plattner was forced out amid a series of controversies. But in North Carolina, Iowa, and Ohio, more moderate candidates will be on the ballot in races that are key to Democrats' chances of flipping the Senate. But despite those distinctions, Republican leaders are aiming to paint all Democrats with the same brush.
These are not social Democrats. These are hardcore, godless communists.
The communists want to take their ruinous and deadly ideology of misery and squalor to every state in America.
You got, people who openly out there espousing and endorsing socialism.
These are socialists. These are Marxist in their ideology.
We're the opposite of the communists.
And Democrats also have a mix of ideologies in a couple of governors' races where Republicans are hoping to flip the seats red. In Kansas, the more progressive candidate won the Democratic primary. Cindy Holscher will take on Republican Ty Masterson in November. But in battleground Wisconsin, the establishment-backed David Crowley beat Democratic socialist Francesca Hong. He will face Republican Congressman Tom Tiffany. Joining me now is the Democratic candidate for governor, David Crowley of Wisconsin. Thank you so much for joining me. Congratulations on your primary win.
Well, thank you so much for that, and thank you for having me.
Well, we appreciate your being here. Let's dive right into it. So we have heard you and other Democrats talk about the importance of unity in the wake of your win on Tuesday. How do you plan to unify Democrats after so much division, after such a heated primary battle?
Well, we as Democrats, we are a big tent, and our job is to make sure that we can keep as many people under this tent as possible and not try to kick people from up under it. And so with this unity tour, we have been hanging out with all the gubernatorial candidates to make sure that we are going to reach our ultimate goal, which is making sure that we defeat the MAGA extremists in Congressman Tom Tiffany this November. But it's not getting caught up in the divisions and the distractions that he wants to focus on, as well as the Republicans here in this state. It's speaking directly to the issues that matter most to Wisconsinites, tackling the affordability crisis, lowering costs for all of our working families, and making sure that they have access to affordable and accessible child care and health care. And I think as long as we continue to do that, coalesce people along the political spectrum, we'll be able to not only bring Democrats together, but those who are, quite frankly, exhausted by MAGA to vote Democratic this upcoming fall as well.
You had such a narrow margin of victory, as you know, and I guess the question is, how do you win over those voters who voted against you in the primary, not to mention the fact you've got to actually expand turnout amongst independents and more moderate Democrats?
One of my favorite quotes is by Teddy Roosevelt, and he said, "No one cares what you know until they know how much you care." And I think one thing that we have lost in politics across this country, and definitely here in Wisconsin, is building relationships. We need authentic relationships for 40, 50 years, Republicans have been sowing the divide between rural, urban, and suburban communities. And now that we're all sharing the same issues, not being able to afford our property taxes or our homes, seeing clinics and hospitals closing in our own backyards, and our public schools not getting enough resources, this is now the opportunity for us to come together. And so we may live in different communities, but we are still one Wisconsin. As long as we focus on the goals and how we can move forward, there's no doubt in my mind that we'll win this election and coalesce people across the political spectrum.
Your opponent in the primary, Francesca Hong, has said she will support you and campaign and work with you. Do you welcome that? Do you want her to be out on the campaign trail with you?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's extremely important to understand that, me and Francesca, we may not agree on everything, but we do agree on that ultimate goal in defeating MAGA extremists and election denier from occupying our governor's seats. And so we're going to do what we can to make sure that Democrats all across this state and those who don't feel like they have a political home understand what's at stake. And as long as we're able to do that, unify our party, unify the values that we believe here in Wisconsin, there's no doubt in my mind that we'll win this election, but continue to focus on the future of this party.
You've just said you don't agree on everything as it relates to Francesca Hong. She obviously was the more progressive candidate. Can you name one issue where you disagree most with her, one of the biggest issues?
Well, one of the biggest issues that we did have a disagreement on was related to the data centers. She wanted to see a moratorium here in the state of Wisconsin. While I don't believe a moratorium would actually work, because you can't place a moratorium on buildings that are currently here. This is about how do we protect ourselves from the current infrastructure as it relates to our water, our air, and our land. And so we can do all those things while also not preempting communities that have done their due diligence to allow for different types of economic development investments.
You're calling for guardrails on data centers. What do you say to supporters of Francesca Hong who want that moratorium? They feel like guardrails don't go far enough.
Well, the thing is that the moratorium doesn't focus on what we currently have here. It's only focusing on the possibility of data centers that will come in the future. And so for me, it's about how do we protect our land, our water, our most precious resources today. We shouldn't allow data centers to extract our resources. We should be looking at how do we extract as much as possible from these data centers. And so with these guardrails being in place, by working with the state legislature and making sure that we protect our communities, that helps with those future data centers at the exact same time. And so it's about building those relationships, understanding the policy, and moving forward after that.
Well, President Trump has a different view. I want to play something he said recently and get your reaction on the other side. Take a look.
I think any community that turns down AI is making a big mistake because your taxes are going to go way down. If you own a house, it's going to be more valuable. Mm-hmm. It's a tremendous thing. And I see it, it's almost like there's a campaign against, data centers. Mm-hmm. But data centers, if you look at the stats, everything's good around them.
How do you respond to President Trump, the argument being too many guardrails could actually disincentivize companies from coming to Wisconsin?
Well, I would actually encourage President Trump to come and talk to many of the community members who live next door to a data center or have a community here. When it comes down to artificial intelligence, yes, it can provide some level of good, but we also have to make sure that it's not replacing productivity, right? Enhancing and creating more efficiency. I think all of us can agree on that. But when it starts to take away from the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow that young people are going to school and relying on to pay their bills, there is some cause to pause there. And so we should be partners as we move forward. And so as it relates to data centers, artificial intelligence, or any level of economic development, we have to protect our people. We have to protect wages and make sure that we're not leaving families behind.
All right, so that is what we're hearing from President Trump on that big debate. I want to play for you something that your opponent, Tom Tiffany, is saying. He's out with a new ad taking aim at you. I want to play a little bit, get your reaction on the other side. Take a look.
Failed executive David Crowley spent recklessly, botched health insurance for thousands, raised property and taxes. Even David Crowley says there's no real difference between him and socialists.
Jeez, that's crazy.
How do you respond?
Well, there we go with the distractions and divisions. We're not even talking about policies that's actually going to keep more money in families' pockets, how we're going to reduce utility costs. And so, one thing that we know about Tom Tiffany, he is a MAGA extremist who has voted 100% of the time with Donald Trump. And, anybody who votes 100% of the time and doesn't stand up to someone and represents their constituents, it doesn't qualify them to be run for governor. I am the only executive in this race. We have done incredible work lowering our unsheltered homeless population, having the lowest count per capita than any community in the entire country. We've reduced overdose deaths by 40%, and we've had to pick every damn can that Republicans have kicked down the road, especially our former county executive, Scott Walker, who ran up a credit card bill, $400 million on property taxes payers here. And so I'm focused on moving forward while he's trying to attach me to candidates that are not even in this race.
Well, when you talk about issues, the biggest issue for voters is the economy. Let me ask you about that. Earlier this year, you dismissed the idea of a gas tax holiday. Gas is up 43% in Wisconsin, Mr. Crowley, since the start of the war. Why rule out temporary relief at the pump?
Because we need permanent relief. We have actually proposed repealing the minimum markup law on gas, which is a law that's been on the books since 1939 here in the state of Wisconsin.
Why not
which
do
means
both,
that
though?
right now,
Why not do both? Why not get rid of the gas tax and then try to work toward long-term relief, too?
Because we need to provide long-term relief. I mean, what we have seen related to one day of gas taxes is not going to provide a sufficient amount of funds for individuals when we can provide that one-time, that long-term relief. We have a 9% markup right here in the state of Wisconsin, which means that we are paying 40 cents per gallon that goes straight to profits. And that's profits that go straight to big oil. It doesn't go to fix the road. It doesn't go to a local municipality. It is literally going to the owners of gas stations. And so to provide that relief, let's actually look at all the laws that we have on the books and do something different. We can't continue to give these gimmicks moving forward. And that's why it's important not just to focus on the governor's race, but how we are electing Democrats in the state Senate and the state assembly to push policies that's going to allow all the boats to rise when that tide rises.
All right, David Crowley, thank you so very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much.
We want to turn now to Tuesday's other big winner in Minnesota's Democratic Senate primary, where it was not a close race. Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan beat Congresswoman Angie Craig by nearly 20 points. And joining me now is the Democratic nominee for Senate, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan of Minnesota. Thank you so very much for joining me. Really appreciate it. And congratulations on your primary win.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Let's delve into the topics. Your victory speech, you said you will work to earn the vote of Congresswoman Craig's supporters. And I'm curious, what specific issues do you believe can appeal to those more moderate Democratic voters who you need to win over in the general?
Well, I think what's clear, and I am so grateful to Congresswoman Craig. We had two highly qualified women who are running for this U.S. Senate seat. She has now endorsed my campaign, and my hope is to continue to travel across the state, meeting voters wherever they're at and earning their trust and support. Congresswoman Craig and I are absolutely 100% aligned that we have to stop Michelle Tafoya from winning this seat. We know that we cannot afford to allow Donald Trump to have one more yes, sir, senator serving, to do his bidding. And I think what, we can find common ground on for folks across the state is, making sure that people can afford the lives they want to live. Folks feel squeezed. They are struggling. And those are the issues, frankly, that I expect, they want us to tackle, because that's what I've heard from folks as we travel across the state. it's not a secret that Congresswoman Craig and I don't see eye to eye on everything, but we are completely aligned in making sure that this seat remains blue. Michelle Tafoya is kept on the sidelines where she belongs, and that we take back the House and have a Democratic Senate majority as well.
I want to get a sense of how you see this race unfolding. In the primary, you said Congresswoman Craig was beholden to corporate donors. Now you are directing that line of attack at your Republican opponent. NRSC Chair Tim Scott said earlier this week that he thinks Michelle Tafoya can put Minnesota in play. If Republicans devote resources to make this race competitive, will you also accept outside help in the form of campaign cash?
I have taken that commitment to not take a dime of corporate PAC money. This has been the campaign of the many versus the money. And I think that's a big reason why we won the primary and why we'll win again in November. Listen, Minnesotans of all political, stripes are sick and tired of corporate PACs, special interest groups putting their thumb on the scale in our elections. And, we had a resounding victory on Tuesday night where folks said that, they want to make sure that we can end Citizens United. I think the best way to end Citizens United is to demonstrate that you can run and win strong grassroots people-powered campaigns. Does that mean I have to hustle a little bit more? Yes, but it also means that I can sleep at night because I am beholden only to Minnesotans. And I think, corporations have an incredible amount of representation in Washington. It's regular folks who need a voice in the Senate, and that's what I plan to do. I guess I'd also say, that for Michelle Tafoya, she's been talking a lot about how, people should simply skip their trip to Starbucks in the face of high fuel prices from this illegal war in Iran. I think that's pretty disconnected from what regular Minnesotans are facing every single day. And, our opportunity is to just continue to make sure that people know there's one person who's fighting for Minnesotans and there's one person who's going to fight for Donald Trump and be a loyal soldier to him, and that's Michelle Tafoya.
Well, speaking of Michelle Tafoya, I want to play a little bit of what she told Minnesota Public Radio yesterday. Get your reaction on the other side. Take a look.
When I believe something is right, I will go with it. When I believe something's wrong, I have the spine to stand up to it. And I'm going to do that. I'm an independent thinker, and we're going to welcome everyone into this camp.
She's effectively making the case there that she will stand up to President Trump when she believes it is necessary. Do you believe that message could resonate with independent voters and make your path more challenging?
I mean, I think there, are two kinds of Republicans. There are mega Republicans who are proud Trump supporters, and there are mega Republicans who are afraid of Donald Trump. And it is clear that Donald Trump will be the one who is essentially telling Michelle Tafoya what to do. We already know, again, that she has, taken the stance that this illegal war in Iran is A-OK with her as we watch the cost of fuel go up for folks, fertilizer prices. We were just out at Farm Fest where, farmers in Minnesota were telling me that they are absolutely being squeezed. The, just chaos and unpredictability that's happening under this president is ridiculous. The weather is hard to control, and you shouldn't have to also deal with the chaos coming out of the Trump administration and Republicans like Michelle Tafoya who are going to continue to give him, whatever he wants. I guess I'd also say, this past year has been incredibly difficult for our state as we, endured Operation Metro Surge. This is another place where, Michelle Tafoya is out of step with Minnesotans and lockstep with Donald Trump. She said, ICE treated children really, really well. Well, I think, Liam Conejo Ramos would beg to differ, our little guy in the blue bunny hat, and the children who've had, their parents disappeared and detained. We don't need another senator who is going to empower this lawless entity that's been allowed to kill 2 Minnesotans with impunity and wreak absolute chaos and violence in communities all across the United States. It has to stop. And we deserve a senator who's going to stand up to Trump.
You do take me to my next question, which is about that. You have said that you want to rip ICE apart. Is that effectively calling to abolish ICE? Do you want to abolish ICE?
I think what we need is an immigration system, but we need an immigration system that, is grounded in public safety and that is grounded in dignity and making sure that we have a pathway to citizenship. We can absolutely have secure borders, but, what we have witnessed literally in the streets here of Minnesota is that Donald Trump's ICE has, detained people simply if they are people of color. I'm a member of the Native American community, and they were detaining Native people who are literally native to this country simply because of the color of their skin. This is out of control. And I think, when we see over $240 billion being given to this agency that is essentially just functioning as a, private police force for Donald Trump, terrorizing our communities, we can absolutely do better. We need to hold these folks accountable for what they've done here in Minnesota.
So, Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, yes or no abolish ICE? Yes or no on abolishing ICE? I'm not clear on where you stand there.
I believe we need an immigration system. ICE has been around.
So replace ICE? You're saying replace ICE with a new system? Are you saying that ICE should be replaced with a new system?
I think this immigration system is broken, and we need to make sure that we are restoring and repairing and healing what they have broken. I am so clear that this week, as we're having a conversation about whether or not ICE should be spending millions of dollars on electric gloves that are going to shock individuals and detainees, what kind of conversation are we having? It is an agency that is grounded in terror and violence and intimidation. That is, what they are doing in communities across the country. The American people deserve better, and we need an immigration system that takes public safety into account, grounded in dignity, a pathway to citizenship that, is not what Donald Trump is offering right now. And I want to hold this administration accountable for the economic impact on our communities, for the trauma that they have caused our children, and for the lives that have been lost, not just here in Minnesota, but 9 other individuals who have been killed by this agency. It's outrageous, and we need a new immigration system grounded in the things that I just outlined.
Very quickly, I want to ask you about what you told Politico in relation to Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. You said you think there should be a new voice for the role of Democratic leader. Who is that voice, and would you welcome Chuck Schumer on the campaign trail?
I mean, Chuck Schumer and I have already had a conversation. I am grateful for the leadership that he has provided, and what I have heard clearly from people all across Minnesota. Yeah, absolutely. But what I have heard from people all across Minnesota is they are ready for bold fighters. They are ready, to ensure that we have voices that are grounded in making sure that people can afford the lives they want to live. And I think it is time for new leadership. I am grateful to have the support of many members of the U.S. Senate and folks who came out early in support of our campaign and what it is that we're building. I look forward to winning this race, getting there, and helping to elect leadership that's ready for big, bold change.
All right, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, we're going to watch your race very carefully. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Coming up, the White House says they had no obligation to tell people they were flying on the decoy plane after an Iranian assassination threat prompted President Trump to secretly switch planes. Plus, mounting concerns of low morale and complaints about poor living conditions as troops serving in the Mideast for months see no end in sight to their deployments. We'll delve into that. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. We're learning even more now about what was going on behind the scenes when the White House had President Trump secretly change planes when leaving the NATO meeting in Turkey last month. According to the Washington Post, U.S. intel officials were skeptical about an Iranian assassination threat against the president that the Israeli government relayed to the CIA. An official telling the Washington Post the Israeli report was viewed as, quote, low confidence. As we've been reporting, a U.S. official tells NBC News the Iranian threat was extremely serious and included the possibility of the use of shoulder-to-air missiles. Meanwhile, the White House is dismissing any notion that it had a so-called duty to warn staffers and members of the press who flew on that decoy plane. Joining me now is NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. Monica, thanks so much for being here with the very latest. So what more is the White House saying about these new details that we're continuing to learn about this secret trip?
Yeah, we've been asking about this so-called duty to warn statute and whether there was any obligation. And according to a senior administration official, the way that this administration and the White House view it, the threat was specific to the president. And so they felt, and they make the argument, that in that moment, that was the only thing that really applied, that the only person they really had an obligation to warn there was the commander-in-chief, and that is why they took such extreme security measures and moved him from the Legacy Air Force One to the 3rd Military Aircraft. And so they're making the argument here, really, that that wouldn't apply to anybody else on the plane, that it wouldn't apply to the top cabinet secretaries, the senior White House officials who remained aboard, or the journalists who, of course, were unaware that the president wasn't actually aboard the aircraft, that they in real time were reporting he was, because they were under that impression since he had boarded the plane and deplaned when they landed in the UK as well. So they are sort of trying to dismiss that. But at the same time, we really do still have questions, Kristen, about the exact nature of the threat that led them to make such a brazen decision.
Well, and of course, no surprise, Monica, that the United States and its allies share intelligence. Broadly speaking, talk about the intel sharing relationship between the U.S. and Israel and how that fits into this.
And it's been fascinating throughout the course of the war against Iran, because there have been several instances in which NBC News has reported that Israel has shared certain intelligence that may be factored into the president's decision making, but didn't necessarily, according to the White House, drive him to make a decision. But it has certainly been a factor again. So in this case, there is reporting out there that Israel was able to provide some of this intelligence. And even the ambassador, Mike Huckabee, to Israel said that in a public interview, basically, that he felt that they were able to pass that along, that Israel was able to pass that along to the U.S. as something that could be credible. As you point out, that Washington Post reporting says it was with low confidence, but clearly this was a situation where the Secret Service takes a look at that, and even if it is low confidence, they felt they could not take any chances. But right now, the relationship between the U.S. and Israel is quite strained. The relationship between the president and Prime Minister Netanyahu is definitely at a rocky point, given some of their public comments and certainly disagreements on a number of issues. So whether that was a factor a month ago when all of this was unfolding is still an open question and something that we're following here. But I think it is worth pointing out that overall, when it comes to these kinds of security measures, even if there is a tiny chance that there could be a threat to the president, that is something, according to this White House, they take so seriously that even the aides who were traveling with him say they knew the risks. And in the case of one person, they told us if he were to die and they were to die, that they would be okay with that because they understood the seriousness and the risks associated with the job and traveling with the president overseas. Kristen.
Oh, that's just extraordinary, Monica. And of course, President Trump did respond to this week. How concerned did he seem to be about the threat against him?
And that's the thing that doesn't fit in completely to this picture in terms of, U.S. officials saying that the threat was extremely serious, because the president has actually been kind of downplaying it and really shrugging it off, saying it was kind of whatever, in his words, and that he wasn't too worried about the threat. But if you remember, Kristen, as we were reporting at the time, he was, at least while he was in Turkey, saying he was worried about potentially being the target of an assassination plot by Iran, even though he wasn't offering any specifics, just in the hours before he eventually did that very clandestine move and was basically smuggled out through that catering truck, which does tell you he obviously was worried about it at the time.
Yeah, it just remarkable. Monica Alba, thank you so much for all of that new reporting. We really appreciate it. Meanwhile, the U.S. war with Iran continues to drag on, and it's taking an enormous and alarming toll on U.S. service members deployed to the region. So much so that military families and members of Congress are sounding the alarm about a mental health crisis. The Military Times reporting that multiple sailors on board the USS Abraham Lincoln have tried to jump overboard as that aircraft carrier nears its 9-month mark at sea. According to U.S. officials, there are growing complaints from service members and their families about deteriorating living conditions aboard that ship. Now, lawmakers are demanding answers. Senator Richard Blumenthal sent Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth a letter asking what steps the Pentagon is taking to address the report of poor conditions on the Lincoln, while Senator Gallego requested an oversight visit to the aircraft carrier by a bipartisan Senate delegation. A U.S. official telling NBC News the USS George Washington will deploy to the Mideast to replace the Lincoln in the coming weeks. Joining me now is national security reporter Gordon Lubold. Thank you so much for being here, Gordon. Really appreciate it. So put this into context. Just how strained is the situation right now aboard that ship?
I mean, Kristen, so, remember, this was a conflict that the president assumed would last 5 to 6 weeks, and we're now in the 6-month mark. And what we're starting to see now is the Navy in particular and other services being overstretched. In this case, most carrier deployments, and a carrier deploys with attendant ships, so it's 4 or 5 ships, usually deploy for 6 to 7 months. Occasionally they do go over. Often they go over a little bit here and there. In this case, this is now they're in their 9th month with the Lincoln. Remember, the carrier that it replaced was the Ford, and it was out for 11 months, almost twice the amount of time. Wow. And so what we're seeing is wear and tear on the ship, wear and tear on the humans, the sailors, and the Marines who are on the ship. The reason why this is significant is because when a ship can't get into port for a port visit, libo, as they sometimes call it, and replenish the ship, then things as basic as fresh fruit and vegetables, other amenities, sailors have no access to, and after a while it takes its toll.
And why can't they go to port?
Right. So I think part of the problem right now is we are in a kind of a active war. It's kind of sometimes a cold war, sometimes it's a hot war, and they're shooting. But force protection of those ships, I mean, carriers is a huge carrier, and so to take it into a port anywhere in the region, anywhere nearby, is extremely perilous.
And what is the Pentagon saying about this situation, Gordon?
Right. So the Secretary of Defense recently was asked, and he said the reporting of it was completely overstated. But the Pentagon issued a statement that says here, the Department of War's focus on mission readiness has been among the top priorities for Secretary Hegseth, and that obviously includes the well-being of our troops. Readiness is non-negotiable. Our forces are postured to win, and the department continues to ensure our people have what they need to succeed. In fairness, Secretary Hegseth himself, a combat veteran, Army, not on ship, but I think does understand these issues. He's built his brand around readiness, lethality, bringing all this stuff back into the military. I think the problem that we're sometimes starting to see, though, is are people willing to say no to the president, to, the demands for this war, which is now stretched so far?
As we said, the USS George Washington is set to replace the USS Lincoln. What's the timeline on that, Gordon? How long is it going to take? Could they be out at sea for a length of time more?
And that's one of the things about being on these ships and when there's so much uncertainty about when you'll be relieved. We are reporting that the GW is going to relieve the Lincoln, but they are in Asia. That will take at least a couple weeks to come through into the region, and then they sometimes do an overlap, and so it could take several weeks before the sailors of the Lincoln get home.
Well, it's remarkable reporting, Gordon. Thank you so much for being here and bringing it to us. We really appreciate it. And an important note, if you or someone you know is struggling, you are not alone. Help is just a moment away. Call or text 988 or visit 988lifeline.org to speak to a trained counselor. We will be right back with more Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Health officials in at least 3 states say they will not adopt new federal childhood vaccine guidelines laid out by the White House. President Trump signed an executive order on Monday overhauling the recommended childhood vaccine schedule. The changes included splitting up the combined measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, known as the MMR vaccine, into separate shots. Today, Illinois became the latest state vowing to ignore that order. Governor J.B. Pritzker calling it a, quote, thoughtless piece of paper that does not reverse decades of research and scientific evidence about protecting kids. It comes as the CDC reports more than 2,400 measles cases have already been reported nationwide this year. That is the highest number in more than 30 years. According to the CDC, more than 90% of those measles cases are in people who are not vaccinated. Joining me now is Dr. Demetre Daskalakis. He is an infectious disease physician and former director of the CDC's National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's dive right in. Does Monday's executive order have teeth, or is this more about the messaging? How do you see it?
Thanks for having me, Kristen. I think at the end of the day, any executive order seemingly has teeth, but it needs to be implementable. And frankly, most of what the executive order details is not implementable. And, you know, there is no such thing as a separate measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. It only comes as the combined MMR vaccine in the United States. So an order that's written that way really implies that the folks who are writing it really don't know very much about public health or vaccines. So I would say in general, you know, until this is implemented, it is just a piece of paper that is best ignored by both states and medical providers.
So what you're saying is very significant. I mean, you're saying it's unlikely, it's impractical for this to actually happen.
I will go beyond impractical and say it is impossible without years of additional research. So, you know, there is no separate measles, mumps, rubella vaccine in the United States. In fact, many countries that had some of the vaccines split up have now started recommending the combined vaccine again. So it is impossible to implement without many years of study.
Big picture, I wonder what you think the impact of this announcement might be. For example, do you think there could be a drastic decline in vaccinations writ large as a result of the announcement on Monday? Are people going to be nervous about getting vaccinated?
I mean, at the end of the day, the Secretary of Health is a chaos agent who spreads misinformation and disinformation. And so, in effect, what this does is create more confusion. And that may manifest itself as people not taking any action. You know, as a clinician who sees patients, I can tell you that when a patient is confused, they generally tend toward an action. And so I think, you know, this back and forth, trying to change the vaccine schedule, trying to make it look like peer countries, countries that in fact we are not peers with because we don't have universal health care, ends up just confusing people, confusing parents, and really re-traumatizing pediatricians who have had to deal with this attack on vaccines over the last, you know, year plus.
And so if you are confused, your advice to parents is talk to your doctor?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'll take it one step level. My first piece of advice is ignore this executive order. And my second piece of advice is talk to your pediatrician and your medical provider.
Okay. Let's talk about the measles cases that we're seeing nationwide. More than 2,400 cases have been reported so far this year in the United States. That already surpasses last year's total. And frankly, it's the most cases in this country in more than 30 years. Are you concerned these cases are going to continue to spike? And what's the overall impact of that?
I'm very concerned that the cases will continue to spike, and it's no longer about there's an outbreak here, there's an outbreak there. You know, I think at the end of the day, the damage that's been done and made way worse by this current health leadership in the United States means that people will be confused about what to do with vaccines. They're going to hear the misinformation. I mean, the fact that the president himself was talking about autism and vaccines when in fact there is no evidence that vaccines are related to autism will just create confusion and fear. And that manifests itself as unvaccinated children. And that means that there are more children susceptible to measles. And to be clear, it's not just a rash and a fever. So folks who get the measles actually end up having pretty significant impact on their immune system that can last for months after the infection, making them susceptible to other bacterial and viral infections. And some of them can go on to have pretty severe complications. So, this is not serving the health of American people, especially children.
Well, you resigned from the CDC a year ago. At the time, you argued the agency, the Department of Health and Human Services, could no longer be trusted as a credible source of public health information. How would you assess these agencies now, a year after your departure?
I think it's gotten worse, Kristen. I don't think that it's gotten better. I think that what we're seeing is health officials doing political strategy rather than public health. And, the casualty in that is our health. It's the health of our kids. And so, confused messages mean failure in public health. And so this is an F. It's not a B-, not a C+. This is an F for public health. Because these agencies are really being controlled by someone whose mission is to destabilize the vaccine effort in the country. And that is inappropriate and, really should be something that should have continuous oversight in Congress. I mean, this is going to mean sick kids, period.
All right, Dr. Daskalakis, thank you so much for joining us, for bringing us your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Kristen.
Coming up after the break, it's the economy and the midterms. The panel digs into what voters say is the most important issue to them this fall. Stay with us on Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Joining me now is today's panel, Tolu Olorunnipa, staff writer at The Atlantic, Megan Hayes, former special assistant to President Biden, and Jesse Arm, vice president of external affairs at the Manhattan Institute. Thanks to all of you for being here. Really appreciate it. Tolu, I have to start with you. You heard my conversations with David Crowley and Peggy Flanagan. What were your key takeaways as Democrats kind of battle for the heart and soul of their party in this primary season?
There's a big effort to try to put out a message about the Democrats being a big tent party and try to coalesce around the things that bring the party together and not focus as much on some of the things that were very divisive during this primary, the things that separated the moderates from the left, and the idea that this insurgent leftist wing of the party was trying to take over. The moderates were able to beat some of that back, but they don't also want to beat away or push away the voters, in many cases, large numbers of voters that supported those progressive candidates. And so they're trying to figure out how to message in a way that allows them to seem like they're listening to the folks on the left without necessarily adopting some of those policies. I thought it was really interesting that Peggy Flanagan would not say, I want to abolish ICE. He said everything short of that, but she would not use that word, those words, because she did not want that to be put in an ad against her. But she does want to coalesce around some of the voters and the activists and the people in Minnesota who showed up in mass earlier this year, and a lot of energy is behind that, and she does not want to lose that energy by making it seem like she's backing away from the abolish ICE type of message that a lot of those voters support.
Megan Hayes, Tolu's point really underscores just how delicate some of these topics are, how every single word matters, and quite frankly, the challenge ahead of these progressive candidates as they enter the general election. How did you read exactly what Tolu is talking about, kind of the careful discussion on ICE and what we're seeing in these general elections, the fact that this is going to be the biggest test yet for progressives in a place like Minnesota and Michigan?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different here than in Michigan. In Minnesota, it's different than in Michigan. I think that you're going to see her moderate. You're going to see Peggy Flanagan moderate a little. But I also think she was a candidate that showed up. She did a lot of events all over the state. People who did not necessarily agree with her, they voted for her because she was showing up in these districts. She won all of the rural districts overwhelmingly. So I just think that she probably has a little bit different of a uphill battle here than Al-Sayed does in moderating. And I think that she did not say that she wanted to abolish ICE, and she really couldn't answer. And I know that she's had some struggles to get there, and it's only been a couple of days, and I think she'll get there when it comes down to it. But I do think that her rip apart ICE is saying it needs to be reformed, and I think most moderates would also agree with you. We also have to remember she's in Minnesota, where they were the very front lines of the ICE all the ICE conflicts this year. So the ICE conversations are going to play differently in Minnesota than they're going to play in Michigan or California or anywhere else. And so I think we have to remember that when she talks about ICE.
Jesse, Michelle Tafoya, name recognition. And you heard in that interview I played with her where she said, I can stand up to anyone when I believe it's the right thing to do, clearly trying to reach for those moderate Democrats, those independent voters who she's going to need if she wins the general election. What do you make of that strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say much the same thing as Toulouse and Megan just now, but I'm on the right, so I'm just going to be a little bit more direct and blunt about it. The normies got their guy in Wisconsin. They pulled everything together. They brought the establishment out. They went hard, and they got Crowley across the finish line. And they're in much stronger position in Wisconsin as a result. Minnesota, yes, the ICE stuff from earlier this year, but it's also just a much bluer state than Wisconsin and Michigan. So Tafoya is compelling on a lot of different levels. But, Flanagan, despite being a lunatic, in my opinion, is probably going to be in pretty strong position to win that seat just because, we often, a generation ago or a couple decades ago, a lot of people were asking what's wrong with Kansas. I think a lot of people are asking what's wrong with Minnesota today.
Well, it's a really interesting point because Tafoya has that name recognition. And when you think about the general election, that could be the one thing, Megan, that makes it tougher for Flanagan.
I mean, I agree that Minnesota's a much bluer state.
For sure.
So I don't actually think that Flanagan's going to have much of a hard time getting to winning this seat. I think she has the establishment backing as well as the progressive backing here. I also think she is a much more palatable candidate. She's a normal mom, and she shows up for people, and I think that people recognize that.
Relative to Al Sayed, for sure.
Let's talk about Al Sayed. Toulouse set us up here because he is moderating ever so slightly, not necessarily in his ideology, but in the broader messaging, clearly aware that he's got to have that unity message. He's got to reach across the aisle. How competitive do you think Michigan is right now? Mike Rogers running ads basically saying, if you felt uncomfortable on Wednesday when you woke up last Wednesday, I'm your guy.
Yeah, if this race is about Al Sayed, he's going to have a hard time winning. He wants to make the race about affordability, about Donald Trump, who is unpopular in Michigan, and about Mike Rogers by tying Mike Rogers to Donald Trump, to the issues of affordability, to his long record as someone who's part of the establishment, and the fact that he's an outsider for Al Sayed. He's trying to use that to get more voters on his side, get more people to say, I might not like everything that he says, but he's not a creature of Washington. He's someone that's different. He's someone that's speaking to the issues that I care about. That's part of the reason he was able to win the primary. But now he has to win over some of those Haley Stevens voters who might be open to an outsider, but don't want somebody who's going to blow up the system.
Jesse, Republicans wanted Al Sayed to win, and yet there is a lot of energy in the progressive left. And again, he's clearly fighting for more of the voters in the middle now. Do you think this is a competitive race? And I ask that against the backdrop of having had conversations with a number of Republicans who say they're increasingly nervous about a state like Michigan.
Yeah. Well, you're right that a lot of Republicans wanted Al Sayed. I was not one of them. I was shrieking for Haley. I thought she was cool there for a little while, doing my, hanging out with Neera Tanden on Twitter, and we were all liking the same things and retweeting each other. But no, here's what I'll say. All right, it is definitely a much more competitive race against Al Sayed. Absolutely.
Because you think he has a lot of energy.
Toulouse was just making the point earlier. If this race is about Abdul El Sayed, then that's bad for El Sayed. But unfortunately, Abdul El Sayed is obsessed with talking about Al Sayed. He's obsessed with that one thing, himself, and then one other thing, Palestine. Okay? And he's not moderating an inch on issues as it pertains to the Middle East. And that Arab vote in Michigan voted for him something like 95%. There's a lot of Jewish voters who are pretty upset with El Sayed and freaked out by the things he said in the wake of the Temple Israel near massacre. But I'll tell you this, 95% of Jews in Michigan are not going to be voting for Mike Rogers in November.
How do you see that race playing out, Megan?
I think that Al Sayed has an uphill battle. He's going to have to build a coalition. He needs to get the working class vote, and he needs to get black voters back on his side. And those were that's the base of the Democratic Party, and those were the people that were behind Haley Stevens. And the race was a lot closer than people. I think she only lost by 8,000 or something votes. So he has an uphill battle. He is going to have to use Haley Stevens. significantly to get these people back on his side. Also, I think this is a state that's going to matter who's at the top of the ticket for both of these people with governor's races and other congressional seats to get people to turn out. They don't have a Donald Trump. They don't have a presidential election. So is Jocelyn going to pull more Democrats out for El Sayed? Is El Sayed going to get her more votes? There's a lot here going on. Michigan is going to be the place to watch, I think, in November.
All right. Well, another place we're watching is Maine, where Troy Jackson, of course, entered the race after Graham Plattner dropped out. Senator Susan Collins, talk about choosing your candidate, had a playbook against Graham Plattner. Let's put it that way. Troy Jackson is out with a new ad. I want to play it and get everyone's reaction on the other side. Take a look.
I'm a fifth-generation logger from Allagash. I grew up a poor kid in a town full of poor people, doing everything right and still struggling to get ahead. And it's worse now. People in this country work so damn hard and still feel so damn broke. That's no way to live. Susan Collins keeps telling us that everything's fine, but we know it's not.
Tolu, the strategy there, I'm a regular guy who feels your pain, basically.
The quotes around regular guy, that's what Democrats seem to want. They want people who they can trust to go to Washington and not embarrass them, not be involved in scandal. With Donald Trump so far underwater in a number of these states, Democrats just want someone who can win and be reliable and be dependable. And Troy Jackson is sort of putting that out by saying, I'm a fifth-generation Mainer. You know me. You know my family. I'm not someone that's come out of nowhere with a lot of baggage or skeletons in my closet. And that's something that is appealing to a number of Democrats who have shifted from primary mode, where it's all about policy and trying to win on the policy front, to electability. And Democrats are very much in the electability argument now, trying to figure out, how do we send a message to Donald Trump? How do we actually win in November? And what is it going to take to get someone from our party into the Senate or into these governor seats, and less so about the ideological battles within the party?
Megan, what do you make of the strategy that we're seeing so far from Troy Jackson? Do you think it's an effective one? And again, coming after Graham Plattner dropped out, and he's really got to reintroduce himself to the state in this context.
Yeah, I think a lot of Democrats have turned the page on Graham Plattner, and I think that put Maine back in play, if we're being really honest. I think that Troy Jackson is a formidable candidate to Susan Collins. She votes with Trump 98% of the time. She is rubber stamping his agenda for the economy, and he's coming out there saying, I feel your pain, I'm a logger. He's speaking their language, and I think those types of things matter. He's authentic, and I think people, this is also, we cannot forget how much this is an anti-incumbency election, and I think that people are just tired of the status quo, and that's why someone like Troy Jackson has a really good shot to win.
Jesse, how do you see Maine playing
With how
out?
obscenely far off the polls were in both Michigan and Wisconsin, I almost wonder if Janet Mills had stuck along in that race a little bit longer, whether she might have fared okay against Graham Plattner had she waited until Election Day before stepping aside. Look, Troy Jackson is Graham Plattner minus the Nazi tattoo, but plus, a couple of kids with his second cousin. So it's a little bit of a weird vibe still. It's not as bad as being a Nazi, that's for sure. But it's all the same policies right on down the line. Hardcore progressives, still a problem for Democrats in November.
Okay, guys, great conversation. Thank you so very much. Really appreciate it. And we are back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC News stations. I'll have exclusive interviews with leader Hakeem Jeffries and Congressman Ro Khanna, plus Senator Bill Cassidy. You do not want to miss it. There is much more ahead on NBC News Now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.